Today I'm going to be talking about a powerful tool used by the Western powers in the Middle East region to sow division and maintain their stranglehold, maintain their control. The most powerful component of this mechanism, what I call the activation of history with illegitimate framing. To all my Lebanese followers, I would love for you to watch this video fully, you guys in particular. Share it around your community and come back to it and comment with your thoughts, because there was a lot of pushback on the Lebanon geopolitical summary video I made a few days ago. I've marked this video for special comment and attention. These two videos, because this will be two parts, is that deep. I marked them for special attention so I can read through your feedback, because you're Lebanese, it's your homeland, and I would love to understand more from your perspective. I bring obviously the analytical, broad, heads up display, but you're living basically in the state itself. You're the people. Now, the question, actually, before I carry on YouTube, I'll put this whole video as my first joined detailed video on my YouTube channel. You can check, you can head over to the channel by clicking on the link in my TikTok bio. But on TikTok, you'll be in two parts, because TikTok is 10 minutes long. Attention spans already absolutely stretched to the absolute fringes, the absolute fluff at that point. But some people, much respect to you guys, you stick around, you listen to the whole thing. The metrics show that loads of people stick around and listen to the whole thing. So anyway, the question: did Lebanon exist before the French showed up? My Lebanon analysis piece said essentially no. I said the French showed up. The most prominent feature in the region was Mount Lebanon, and they called the country Lebanon because of the mountain. Now, a lot of Lebanese people were unhappy with that framing. They pointed out that Lebanese history is ancient. People have been here for thousands of years. Yes, people have been everywhere for thousands of years. Lebanon has a distinct culture, though, they said. Lebanon is mentioned in the Bible over a dozen times. Some people said over 70 times. I hear you. My speciality, though, is in geopolitics, understanding and then sharing with you, my dear viewers, the way the great game on the world stage works. So today we unlock a new topic: Western activation of history and weaponization. You see, when the West came colonizing, be that in Africa, be that on the Indian subcontinent, be that in the Middle East, Lebanon included, or the Ottoman Empire at the time, one way to keep the natives under the foreigner's thumb, to keep them under their control, was to break up any powerful blocks and frame narratives to get natives to oppose one another, to oppose their neighbor, break up the unity of the natives, somehow convince them that their enemy is their neighbor, not the foreigner from 10,000 miles away. Convince them the neighbor is the enemy, and they won't notice that the foreigner is stealing from the land beneath them, or the foreigner is stealing from the food out of their children's mouth, or stealing the future of their entire peoples. To rob the people blind, make them look the other way at their neighbor. How? By activating history. Let me explain with an example close to home, ethnically, from where I am. I'm Bangladeshi. In the Indian subcontinent, there's a rich, fat history. There were Hindu empires, there were Muslim empires, there were the Maharajas, the Sultans, the Nawabs, the uh, you get the point. Okay, I won't go too deep into this because it's still TikTok. It's still there's whole books written about this. But the summary: Muslims and Hindus lived side by side in what I call Greater India. Consider Bangladesh, Pakistan, and India to be Greater India, right? The subcontinent. Muslims and Hindus lived side by side. There were wars, there were tensions, yes, but there were wars between natives or near foreigners like the Mughals. The Mughals are not native to the Indian subcontinent, but they're very close. This is important to distinguish between native and near foreigners and distant colonizers. There's a difference, you see, because such rule by the natives and near foreigners, they were tied to the land. They had a love for the people and the place and a consideration for the culture of that area. This is different from the extraction mindset of the colonizing Western powers. They came to suck the region dry. They see only the wealth potential If that means the death of uncountable, numberless natives, so be it. They're just, they're just they're just our colonies, right? So long as we can profit from the land and the wealth, we will steal from them. The Mughals never operated in that manner, right? The Maratha Confederacy, the Hindu empire, they never operated in that manner in the Indian subcontinent. But the British, under the East India Company, and then the British Raj, when the British state took direct control, not company control, of the Greater India Territory, they were very different in their treatment. But going back to control, in India, like everywhere, the colonizers came, they assessed the context, the lay of the land, they read through the history and looked for divisions to weaponize. In India, there was a very clear candidate for weaponization: religion. Muslim, Hindu. These are the two divisions. We're going to stoke that fire. They stoked the fires of this division so well by the end of the 200 years that the British had ruled the subcontinent in some way, shape, or form, all of Greater India. At the end, there was a very clear split between Muslim and Hindu, a division that has naturally never uh, arisen throughout India's entire history. Thousands of years, there was no state division in this way. There were the Hindu empires, there were the Muslim empires, but they all governed sort of each other, and people lived side by side, no probos. To this day, though, the old wounds that the British inflicted, the weaponization of religion, to this day exists in stark contrast to the natural lay and unified nature of the land and its people. Pakistan and Bangladesh, Muslim majority, fragments of Greater India, and India smack in the middle, the Hindu majority fragment, the biggest slice, if you will, of the Greater India of old. Very clearly Hindu. So there's a Hindu Muslim split even today. Now, in the Middle East, when the French took the Greater Syrian Mandate from the Ottomans, they took control of the Syrian territories from the Ottomans, which includes Lebanon. They looked through the history of the people in the region. Where can we find, they asked, a division that would allow us to separate out the people here and reinforce their separation for our benefit, for their loss, unbeknownst to them? They won't know, right? We'll make them think they're fighting for their uniqueness, their independence, because they're special in some way, right? Ah, yes, I found it, they thought. I found it. This region has historic significance. It's mentioned in the Bible, has a very distinct ethnic variance. The people of the mountains are Druze and Maronite Christians. Perfect, right? They have historical tensions and animosities towards other groups, especially right next door in Syria. Even when the Ottomans ruled them all, there was tensions between the governors in the Lebanese region and the Syrian region. Let's do it. We've got it. We'll activate their history, reinforce the idea of the people here being different from the others, and by doing so, this will be the device we use to keep them separated and to keep the fragment that we lop off under our control. We will tell them how to rule. We will set up their government. We will tell them who can be president, who can be prime minister, who can be speaker of the house, because they can't rule themselves. Don't be silly. They're natives. They're natives, guys. They're our colonies, bless them. Right? Because the Lebanese people have distinct ethnicities or genetic roots different from the Syrians or Arabs generally. I acknowledge that. But culturally, the Lebanese are Arabs. Culturally, I think most Lebanese will agree with that. And in the region, there's no issue with integration of the Lebanese population. Yes, there are Druze, there's Maronite Christians, and most of the Arab world are not Maronite Christians, but that's not been historically an issue. Right? I invite alternative opinions from my Lebanese brothers and sisters, but what I'm getting at is Moroccans are Arabs, Syrians are Arabs, Lebanese are Arabs. So are those in the Gulf monarchies, the Arabian Peninsula. It's a culture, not an ethnicity, and you're not special in that your ethnic roots are, unique and everyone else is homogenous. Moroccan and Gulf state Arabs are very different ethnically, as are you guys, the Lebanese, and the Lebanese are different. But Lebanon, the region, has not been a modern nation state for even 100 years. And before that, it was under a much broader Muslim empire ruled for 800 years by Muslims under varying flags. Muslims and Christians here lived side by side of a rich tapestry of culture, religion, religious groups, sects, and ethnic historical roots. But to otherize yourself from the locals, because the French colonizer reminded the people of the region of their unique history 80 years ago, plays perfectly into the divide and conquer mission of the foreign occupiers. We'll carry on in second part. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to part two of our Lebanon deep dive. As Chandler says in Friends, boys, we're going in. Okay, so we finished on talking about how the French played perfectly the divide and rule mission in Lebanon by activating the history of the people, picking a specific time in history, activating it to otherize them from the locals in the region, and through isolation, increase the French hold on the land. Now, carrying on. An occupied an occupied mind, after all, is far more valuable than the occupied land. And that's why the French were doing this. Why any colonizer does what they do in terms of activating history to weaponize internal divisions, to fuel the fires of internal embers, to make them raging flames that they can better control the region, because a divided region is much easier to control than a united front that opposes a foreigner, sort of faces the outside. Now, why is an occupied mind more valuable than an occupied land? Because the mind costs very little to occupy, but land occupied whilst the people of the land resist, that requires decades and billions of dollars or shekels or whatever currency to keep the population, to keep a lid on the population. A final point I would like to make: I remind you of one other notable example of activated history that's been used to sow division and chaos in the Middle East region. Another activated history that those foreign to the land have been um, able to wield as a weapon, and a fitting tool it is to keep the region burning and keep the land and its people from unifying. The activated history by another foreign state who took other parts from the broken Ottoman Empire at the end of the First World War, the British. So we talked about the French in Lebanon and activating their history of being of Phoenician descent, speaking Latin, having trade ties with the Western Mediterranean regions, being Maronite Christian, um, otherizing them from the Arab culture that naturally the Lebanese now in the modern era fit into, right? Otherizing them so that you can divide them from the rest of, Syria and the rest of the Levantine region, and therefore you can maintain your French stranglehold. Well, this is the British. They were also in the Levantine region. They also took parts from the collapsing Ottoman Empire after the First World War. The British activated the history in Palestine. They picked a time period that benefited their strategy, their strategic goals. They looked through history of Palestine and thought, 3,000 years ago, another nation whose name is mentioned in the Bible, mentioned in the Quran, in fact, Bani Israel. And the British wielded that activated history to sow division far more spectacularly unjust and damaging, it must be said, than what the French did in Lebanon, because that required the import of, or the return. You see, it's all about framing, but the return from 3,000 years ago, return a different skin color, okay, interesting. But they import an ethnicity and plop it into historic Palestine, and then reinforce the activated segment of history that the British chose to maintain that strategic dominance in the region, to maintain the British foothold, just like the French maintained their French foothold, both in the Middle East, but the British did it, you could say, a lot more successfully. Depends on success, your definition, of course. But for those who contemplate, what I'm trying to say is, you'll realize this horrifying truth. The playbook is the same. Activate a convenient slice of history for the natives, or the land, not even the natives in some cases, like the British did in Palestine. Just the history of the land, just activate a specific time period and use that to sow division. Divide the natives, keep them fighting amongst each other, keep the chaos, keep the land burning. And while the land burns, we extract the resources and impose our control and our will on the land and its people to continue to entrench our control and extract even more. Part of, you see, my mission is to highlight these shocking truths. They're available. This is not like CIA classified data I'm decoding. This is all available, but it's not something you'll be told. And if you're told about the history, it'll go through, it'll be the facts, it'll hit the filter of Western spin, it'll start spinning and it'll hit you and it'll start spinning you as well. And before you know it, if that's all you can, if that's all you ingest, you will be spinning with the Western spin, and everything will be framed in a pro Western light when things are not so clear, things are not so cut and dry, black and white as they may seem. The people of the shocking truth is that the weaponization of history and the activation of certain history has been used to weaponize neighbors against one another for the benefit of the foreigners. A final example, Iran. Why did the Iranians go through their 1979 revolution that you hear about, the Islamic Revolution? What were they revolting against? They were revolting against a foreign puppet system. So the system in Iran was backed, was supported, was loved by the foreigners. Have you heard of BP oil? Look into the history of BP oil. British Petroleum is an oil company from the British Isles, from the United Kingdom, where I ironically am now criticizing them. Where's the oil on the British Isles? It's not here. You see, BP was set up in Iran. The oil's in Iran. It's just the people extracting the oil are from here. They went to Iran, they started extracting the oil, and when the terms seemed unfavorable to the natives, they said to their administration, to the Iranian leadership, what are we doing? Why are we basically giving away our resources to foreigners? Can we do something about that? And the leadership basically said, nah, bruv. And they were like, Shah, you need to skedaddle. Islamic Revolution, 1979. That's basically it. It was the natives' opposition to foreign rule and foreign extraction of resources. Anyway, I'll end it there. There's a part 3 coming up where I talk about Lebanon, its strengths in terms of its economics, in terms of its people, and how weaponization has kept it suppressed, but a understanding and a enlightenment or an awakening of the reality amongst the Lebanese people that, oh, our divisions have been, our understanding of our otherization from our neighbors has been engineered and has been used, weaponized by the foreign ex-occupiers to keep this land divided. And when we can rise above that, we unlock new levels of prosperity for our people and for the region. We'll get to that in part 3. See you soon. If you want the part 1, 2, 3 all in one smooth collection, I'll chuck it on YouTube as my first in-depth analysis as a single YouTube video. So subscribe to my channel if you don't know how to get to it. It's Mahfuz Talukder 25 on YouTube, or just on TikTok. Just go to my bio, click the link. YouTube will be the first link that you click on in the link tree, which is just a list of links, and I'll see you there. Thank you, and see you on the next one. Here's why Lebanon's future depends on breaking down the walls that divide it from its neighbors, not putting up new ones. This is part 3 of my Lebanon deep dive, so check out the other parts first for better context. Not sure why I said context like that. Now, Lebanon is what could be called a dormant state. It's a country with massive potential, but is economically, geopolitically, and militarily currently hamstrung, absolutely disabled. And we'll explain how and how it can climb out of this hole into prosperity for its people. Lebanon has a population of roughly 5 million. Lebanon sits on some of the most valuable real estate in the world, the crossroad between Europe, Asia, and Africa. It's smack in the middle, along with historic Palestine and some other Levantine coastal regions. For over 3,000 years, the Phoenicians turned this tiny strip of land into a trading empire that stretched across the Mediterranean. They didn't build walls, they built bridges, land or sea ones. But here's what happened. After World War I and the collapse of the Ottoman Empire, 800 years of Muslim rule, during which time people of all ethnicities and religions lived freely in these lands, after that ended, the French took over, distant and with little to no ties to the land except the Crusader states that existed briefly and with a desire by the French to extract the wealth of the region and send it back to their Western European republic, the French deliberately emphasized Lebanon's differences from its neighbors to maintain political and economic control over the territories that were given to France, basically by France itself. The winners choose what to keep, basically, and France and the UK basically won the First World War, so they got to choose. Essentially, these were hybrid colonies called mandates. So the French had the mandate of Syria, which included Lebanon. The British had the mandate for Transjordan, or the British mandate for Palestine, once it cut up into Jordan and Palestine. And they did what they wanted with these territories, as if, they're like, trading cards, Yu-Gi-Oh cards that they can just, barter with other people. No consideration for the people of the land itself. Now, the French activated the history of the region to suit the French, picking a time period that exaggerated Lebanon's differences, dividing them from their locals rather than uniting them with their locals. They carved out borders and isolated communities that had traded and intermarried for centuries, saying, "You guys are different. Your ancestors were Phoenician. Those guys, their ancestors are different. There's some Arab thing, right? You could be culturally Arab, but don't forget your roots, and don't forget to use your roots to divide yourselves from the others, right? Because we need that. I mean, because you need that, right? Because we want to extract resources. I mean, because we want you to have your independence." That was the French framing, basically. Now, this isolation became Lebanon's economic prison. Today, Lebanon's economy is worth about $20 billion, smaller than Syria's 40 billion, despite Syria's being in a devastating 15-year war for the last decade and a half, right? It was balkanized, fragmented into North Syria and a Kurdish region, and a Damascus held and aligned with Iran. Now, Lebanon's banking sector once served the entire Arab world. Well, I think it was called. Anyway, I don't remember exactly what Lebanon was called. I think it was called. Beirut was the Paris of the Middle East, perhaps. Anyway, the political isolation of Lebanon as a state has shrunk it to serving mainly locals, and barely at that. The capital and the country as a whole has no effective sovereignty. Their ethno state neighbor from the south, for example, drops whatever they want, whenever they want. North, boom. South, boom. Beirut, boom. Mafi mushkila, no problem. There's no dignity, there's no control. The descendants of the Phoenicians, who were trading masters, who invented one of the world's first alphabets. Some people say the world's very first alphabet, like a codified system. North Semitic, because Phoenicians are a Semitic people, anti Semitic, you probably know that word. The Phoenicians, from which the Lebanese are descended, they are a Semitic people, like real ones from the region, right? Not Poland. And these people who invented the alphabet, now they struggle with basic electricity, reliable infrastructure. How far the region has fallen, eh? Yet there is capacity to rise once more. For prosperity and dignity and strength, there's potential. Lebanon's secret weapon, you see, isn't its mountains or its beaches. It's the people. Christians, Muslims, Druze, ethnic Arabs, non-Arabs, whatever, the whole lot, and others have created this unique blend of cultures that naturally connects the East to the West in a fitting geographic location that sits on the Mediterranean, literally connecting Eastern goods, for example, from China and Iran and the Indian subcontinent, if it comes over land, literally connecting it to the West, because they sit on the Mediterranean coast, so they can ship it as far as Western Europe or even further to the Americas from Lebanese ports, if they had the investment and infrastructure and trade relations in place to actually capitalize on that. This cultural diversity, which some see as a weakness, is actually Lebanon's greatest strength in regional trade and diplomacy. You see, having access to different cultures, different ways of thinking within your population as a state allows you to be at a state level more flexible and attuned to different ways of thinking, and that can boost prosperity, especially through things like intergovernmental things like trade and technology transfer. If your diversity is wielded as a tool for the collective good rather than as a weapon to sow division, it can really be valuable. Now, the Phoenicians knew that prosperity comes from connection, not isolation. Lebanon's 5 million people could punch way above their weight again. First, they have to punch on their weight, because now they're punching below their weight. But they can only do that if they choose cooperation over separation. And the geopolitical situation in the region is, Keep Lebanon fragmented from the rest of the Arab Levantine region. Keep Syria and Iraq from, any sort of confederation unification attempts. Keep you know keep Jordan as it is. Keep the Gulf monarchies separated, because you've appointed various kings and they're definitely not going to give up their seats for another king. Keep the whole region fragmented, and we're kushti, right? We're good. Now, only if Lebanon, coming back to this country, only if they rise above the weaponized activation of their history, um, so that they see their neighbors, Syria in particular, as an other, only if they can rise above that tool that was implemented by foreigners from 10,000 miles away, if they can manage that, their chance, analytically speaking, at prosperity at a citizen and at a state level increases considerably. Syria is also culturally Arab and has close ties to Lebanon. And Palestine and Jordan and the rest of the Levant area, the regional bloc and the Gulf monarchies, they're all culturally very close. They have very close cultural ties. But they have, especially Jordan and historic Palestine, they've got a separate state to deal with first, which leaves them unable to work particularly closely with their brother state of Lebanon. If and when Lebanon is strengthened, potentially through close ties to its culturally compatible neighbors, the people, no doubt, are hungry for innovation and prosperity and are willing to lead that with a youthful population ready for change. And the Mediterranean is still there on Lebanon's shores, waiting to benefit the people. For the unbiased news and analysis without the Western spin, I'm Mahfouz, and I'll see you on the next one.